You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MIAX is proud to bring you Spikes Volatility products. Spikes options and futures are traded on the Spikes Volatility Index, Spike, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's volatility reimagined. Learn more about Spikes at miaxoptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. Volatility Views is also brought to you by Matrix Executions, LLC, an agency broker-dealer focused on best execution and trading workflow automation. A technology-driven firm, Matrix is led by trading pioneers with decades of experience designing and building best-in-class solutions for options markets. Matrix connects to all domestic exchange venues and multiple international exchanges and serves both institutional and individual clients. For more information on Matrix Executions, LLC, please visit matrixexecutions.com. And now, it's time to take a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. My name is Mark Longo from the OptionsInsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever insightful, at least we hope so, Options Insider Radio Network. Reminding all of you out there, wherever you get the show live after the fact, make sure you keep rating and reviewing it on your platform of choice. If you get it via the app, and go into the app stores, and a lot of you like to do that, of course, you know, your Google Podcasts, your Apple Podcasts, wherever you get the shows, Spotify, Amazon Music, and all that stuff. It's even there now. It's crazy. Make sure you keep rating and reviewing. It does help new folks continue to discover the content. Of course, keep those questions coming too. We do love to hear from all of you, and we're sure you have questions these days. A lot of things happening in the world of volatility. And let's see who we're hearing from on the old program today. First, let's go out to the Matrix hot seat, where we are joined once again from the GIOVINAZZI fortress there on the shores of Maine. Thunder raining down from the heavens, waves crashing against the cliffs. We are joined by the rock lobster himself, Mr. Andrew GIOVINAZZI from OptionPit.com, by way of, what do they call it now, Robin Hood trader over there? How are things going, Mr. Rock Lobster? Welcome back to Volatility Views.
It's good. Mr. Sebastian is taking St. Joseph's Day off today. He's resting his weariness. I think he's doing more media than he ever has in his life. Maine is sunny, but very windy right now. Sunny and windy.
It's not allowed to be windy in my descriptions. It's always dark and stormy there. Then we're going down south to a little bit more serene and certainly from a weather perspective, nicer hamlet there, where we're going out to the MIAX hot seat. We are joined once again by Mr. Brian Overby, the senior options strategist, a.k.a. the options guy, a.k.a. the host of Options Playbook Radio over there at Ally Invest. Mr. Overby, welcome back to Volatility Views, sir. It has been too long.
I agree with the latter there. It has been too long, but it is always great to be back. Especially, we've had a lot happening in volatility this week, so I'm ready to dig in.
All right, so let's dig in then. It is time for the Volatility Review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Volatility Review, the portion of the show where we break down what the heck's lighting up our tapes from a volatility, trading, and trending and unusual activity and all sorts of fun perspectives. And as you alluded to there at the top of the show, we got some vol to talk about this week and some movement in vol, which is interesting. Coming into showtime, the markets are kind of mixed to end the week. It's kind of been an interesting week. We had a lot of, shall we say, interesting action earlier in the week, a lot of upside, then some spookage post-Fed. So we had some red on the vol screen, then we had some green coming in yesterday towards the latter portion of the day. Today, now we're seeing mixed markets. The S&P roughly unched up about maybe 0.1% or so. The Dow off about 0.5%, and NASDAQ up about almost 0.75% to kick off the show here. That means after having a little bit of fits and starts earlier in the session, most of the major vol products are now in the red. Spikes coming into showtime was about 2015. That puts it down over 1.5 handles, about 1.6 points from where it was this time last show. VIX cash just ever so briefly north of the 20 handle there, down a little bit over a point, about 1.05 to be precise, from where it was this time last week. VVIX staying frothy, staying firm around a 115, up about 3 points from where it was this time last show. A lot of stuff to parse, a lot of stuff popping off this week. Let's go out to the MIAX hot seat. Mr. Overby hasn't joined us on this show here in the, it's hard to say new year because it's March, but it is a new year for his appearances here on Vol Views. So let's start there. Mr. Overby, sir, what's lighting up your tape and the tape of all the Ally Invest clients in the world of volatility these days?
Well, this week what we were dancing around the 20% level. We've been talking about this level in the actual VIX index, also in the Spikes index. Just that level has been a sticking point for the VIX index. And even though we're setting new highs, we just can't seem to get below it. But yet we did dip down to the lowest level that we've saw in the VIX since the pandemic, since the big March downturn. We actually broached we breached the 19 level down to around 1845. And at that point in time, it just kind of seemed like, well, what else is there to be negative about in the marketplace? So fairly bullish sign across the entire marketplace in general. Looked like interest rates were going to be leveling out. We got the VIX finally breaching the 20 level, but guess what? We couldn't stay there. And now we had a big down day yesterday, some news from the Fed. The Fed decided to talk a little bit about what they want to do with their treasuries and their margins today. And guess what? We opened down, VIX back up above 20. So interesting week overall. I would love to see the VIX below that 20 level for a couple of days. That would, I think, be a fairly bullish sign in the marketplace, but we just can't seem to do it.
And I know these days VIX and volatility are becoming more top of mind for a lot of your clients over there in Ally Invest. And you're starting to get a lot more questions about it, not just on your show you do with us, but on your regular webinars and things you do over there at Ally Invest. So explain that to our audience a little bit. How much more engaged do you see the Ally Invest crowd, the Ally Invest audience becoming in all things volatile, not just VIX, but the whole pantheon of volatility products, right? You got VXX out there. You've got a UVXY for the hardcores out there. You got spikes and everything else. How much more engaged in volatility and interested in it are they becoming over there these days?
Well, we get a lot of questions about it in general, just because of the stubbornness of the volatility ever since we've actually been setting new highs in the marketplace. So yeah, we definitely have had more. We've seen more volume in the VIX index, in the VIX option contracts that follow it, and a lot of these VIX products. So volume on option trading in general at Ally Invest has been setting records, even in the new year. But obviously, at the end of 2020, we were setting new records in volume across the board, much like you're seeing on a lot of the exchanges. And also, we've some of the products that have been leading the way are the VIX products overall and the volatility products in general. But overall, there has just been more interest in the volatility index because of the stubbornness of the index and the fact that a lot of people on the financial news have been talking about it, especially this 20 level.
Let's go on out to the land of the rock lobster. I know you're crazies in your pit chat over there. They talk about nothing but volatility over there. So what's been lighting up their tape, and indeed the tape of Volman this week, sir?
Yeah.
Can you find Volman? Is he hiding over there? Can you dig him up for us?
Yeah, I know. The problem with Volman is, since he's just a little red stick man, he doesn't talk very much. So I have to interpret for him.
He does sign language, right?
Yes, exactly. I use sign language. Hold it. What do we have in the option block yesterday? We had Luigi. Like, Luigi, will you just tell Volman to sell his puts?
Can I just say, was he right or was he right? Because the second he sent that in, no sooner did everything turn around when you said you were still in, and bam, it just bounced up the heavens.
Literally, he sent that in, and then, I don't know, 5 minutes later, like, I had stops in for all the puts because I was riding them for a while, and I took profits on a ton of puts. I think got stopped out. I'm like, crap, it was still good. And then today I'm like, okay, well, I'll ride my long, because I had the long leg left of the strangles, my vol strangles. And I swear, like this morning, I was pretty aggressive. Okay, vol's going up. I hadn't sold anything yet. And then it stopped, like our Q sell, everything stopped. I'm like, you know what? I've seen this movie before. We are not going to get a sell-off, and we are not going to get a vol rally. And I dumped 80% of the upside vol I had. So now I own a bunch of upside vol for basically a big credit, which I will leave till expiration. But you can't get a vol. You can't get a Q sell off. You can't get a SPY sell off. Like, the banks look awful this morning, and they're already bouncing back. It's like, oh my God, you can't get anything out of this market. It's very so for a back spreader, you have to basically take the scraps on the table that is proffered and be happy, which is what I did today. So it wasn't a terrible day. It was all right. But as far as vol goes, VIX is 2031. It's decaying nicely into the weekend after the rally yesterday. And the big question is do we get into a new regime where, like, there's a lot of knowns. Okay, like the COVID thing, like I said on the show, it's like now it's like 50-50. I think the market is now actually starting to care about these macro issues, and government spending seems to be a little bit off the hook. But other than that, the S&P 500 is up 13 cents. So the movement we have today is not really a 20 VIX market. It's more like a 15. So, can we see those lower numbers? I don't know. I'm not going to buy any more puts till next week, and see what happens. I generally don't like jumping into them after I've already sold them, and so I'm just sitting here watching. However, there's still like that. There's that big contango in the futures, which is, it's caused by the back month vol still higher. And there's not a lot of I still don't think there's a lot of sellers of vol out there. There is more than there were before, but we're still trading at a 20 VIX, and we're only 50 SPX points from the all-time high. So still odd condition. And for Ken vol, yeah, VIX, I think, can easily maybe get to 17 or 18 by April expiration if this keeps up, because they're not going to sell the Qs off. They're not selling oil off right now. They're not selling the banks off. A lot of the COVID sensitive industries are actually all on the mend. So what if they're not selling any of that? What the hell are they going to sell? They're not selling gold. They're not selling Bitcoin. So nobody's getting out. So listen, if they ain't selling it, vol isn't going up. And I think at least for today, as we go into the end of the week, I think that's what we got. What we haven't gotten is that blast past 4,000. Let's just say the stars have not aligned for that move higher quite yet. So, we'll wait and see how it all goes. But as far as right now goes, the way I think we'll be a 19 handle by the end of the show. And the reality is if they're not going to sell off, like the big stuff isn't going to sell off, and everything that's relatively sensitive is, what they're selling? They're selling treasuries. They're selling treasuries and driving yields up. And maybe that's enough for right now. So I think that's what we got. And, and as they say, you got to trade the market you see, not the market you want. So right now what we got is take your money, be happy, and move along.
And fade the Rock Lobster when it comes to taking off and putting on his VIX. It seems like it works out. Mr. Rock Lobster, you are a reliable contraindicator, sir. So you should maybe market that. Put a little newsletter out. The Rock Lobster, easy for me to say. Contraindicator. Because our listeners have picked up on it. And hey, more power to them. They're a savvy bunch. They know good signal when they see it. Let's see what we're seeing out here in terms of signal in the land of the volatility products. Let's go on out to the land of the futures first. Coming into showtime, of course, March future rolling off the board. So that one no longer on the table over there. Coming into showtime, the April future had a hefty premium to the cash as both continue to erode, but the cash eroding a wee bit faster there. It was close to 3.5 points premium to the cash. That's about a half a point higher than it was this time last week. Mr. Rock Lobster, this has kind of been our point of contention for a while. Obviously, the back portion of the curve has come in a little bit. It's no longer 28.5, 29 anymore. Now we're seeing that plateau level around 27, a little bit shy of it going out in the summer months, and you get a little bit north of that 27 level beyond September over there, but still plateauing just about a point and change lower. What are your thoughts on this continually bizarre chin-scratching VIX futures term structure, sir?
I would say now it's starting to, the curve shape is starting to normalize. Like today is as normal as I've seen it. Like what I mean, normal by historically normal. Kind of how the contango, it's sloping down. And like I say, today was a relatively big test, right? Like there's those funky bank rules changed. Our fixed income guy was talking about it, but banks didn't sell. They sold off this morning and then stopped. And as far as the curve goes, it's still above. Again, we did an analysis on, just average VIX future premium over cash, and it's still at a pretty high level, actually, right now. So there is still plenty of vol future to come in that's already baked into the curve. So VXX, UVXY, it is still buying really expensive futures relative. And historically, that's not been good for those. So I do still have some VXX puts on that I didn't get shaken out of. I just sold the upside today instead of just dumping all the puts. But there is still a lot of potential for that to come in. So those futures are still expensive. It wasn't expensive as it was 3 weeks ago, but they're not cheap. Normally the kind of the tail end of the dog is somewhere around a 20 VIX, which is kind of roughly the long-term average. But it can't be the long-term average when VIX is 20 already. So there's plenty of juice in that curve if folks come in and start selling some upside options. So that's really, I think, I haven't changed my mind on that subject yet.
And Mr. Overby, I know you guys are watching all things VIX futures these days with a lot more interest. Haven't had a chance to really pick your brain on this so far in 2021, but it has been a weird year for many things, including the VIX futures this year. As I mentioned earlier, it's kind of had this strange plateau shape, which we haven't really seen before. And certainly, if it has popped up, it hasn't lasted anywhere near this long. It's been this shape for the better part of this year, pretty much at this point, which is fascinating that it kind of slopes up in the beginning there. Then it just kind of plateaus. Like I said, it's around that 27 level right now for pretty much the rest of the year and doesn't really seem to want to change anytime soon. What are your thoughts on this somewhat aberrant shape we're seeing out there in the world of VIX futures, sir?
Yeah, and I think that actually kind of drove a little bit of some of the strategies that we talked about on our education platform. We actually looked when we saw the VIX actually dip below the 20 level, even though we couldn't really stay there. Saw that as a more positive sign, but more importantly, that the futures actually came down with it. And Mark was basically saying that as we saw the May, the April right now, right around the 23 handle, May right around the 25 handle, those were hanging out around 28, 29 for the longest of time, where the actual cash index was down, couldn't seem to breach the 20 level. The futures just couldn't seem to breach the 25 level. So interesting in that I took that more as a bullish sign going into the end of the week, looked at doing a long call spread on the position. And I do actually, in the SPX, like to talk about buying butterflies, buying long spreads when we got the VIX above 20, because they're just so inexpensive relative to the VIX being around the 15 handle, the 10% handle. But as of today, we actually just rolled out of those long call spreads and actually rolled them into a butterfly trade. So started out by selling an at-the-money option contract, buying an in-the-money option contract, and rolling those into butterflies. And basically, that's my rendition of I don't want the cheese anymore. Just let me out of the trap, right? So I'm just kind of hoping that we would get a little bit of a bounce up today. But as Mark mentioned, we had bad news in the banks, and banks are the ones that are actually driving the treasuries higher. We do see the treasury on the 10-year now trading at 1.7%. Via the TXN. I'm looking at that. So the yield's right around 1.7 right now. But we do see, the 200-day moving average in the VIX index and the actual spot is around 25%. And we still have the 50-day and the 20-day trading below it. The spot index is underneath those levels right now. So even though we've been hanging at this level, it's been interesting to note that the 200-day VIX average is right now showing about 25.5% right now is basically where that's trading at. And it's been hanging out there for a while. So overall, interesting to see the VIX around 20, but I find it more interesting that the futures have finally came down and the nearer term futures, the April and May, are trading right around that 25%, 24% level.
What else is interesting to see is some interesting paper out there in the world of the options. Let's kick things off in Spikes land. Spikes lighten it up out here this week, particularly on Tuesday. Tuesday was a big day across the vol spectrum for obvious reasons. Big movements out there in the vol space on Tuesday, and Spikes no exception out there. A couple of big trades going off out there. First, let's break down the top. Let's go top six because they're all pretty much equidistant out there. Number 6 out there, top positions at Spikes land. We got the June 50s, 5 O's, followed by the June 25 puts. Then we got all April the rest of the way. The April 40 calls, number 4, 30 calls, number 3. 22 puts, number 2, and 18 puts, number 1. You could flip them all around because they all are about the same size. About 1,000 lots going up out there in Spikes this week. In particular, on Tuesday, we saw a couple of funky trades. First off, we saw a July. You couldn't tell at first if it was a strangle or a risk reversal, so I did a little digging into these bad boys. Looks like it was a risk reversal in actually June. I take that back. June. Paper buying puts and selling calls. It was the June 25.50, effectively a risk reversal. That 25 put is pretty beefy now too. So they were using the call to try to finance some of the put. They did it for $2. They did $2.70 on the put. Paper obviously buying that 1,000 times, then selling 1,000 of the 50 calls for 70 cents. Obviously trying to get some of the meat off the bone on that pretty hefty put there. If you're wondering, that's about a 67 vol they paid out there for those puts, and they sold about a 94 vol in the 50 calls. But they weren't done yet. Someone else, or maybe perhaps the same person because it's the same size, coming in later that same session doing what looked like first maybe a funky iron condor. It looks like paper actually bought the call spread here and then sold the put spread against it. It was the April 30-40 call spread going up for $2.60 and 61 cents. So effectively $2 again, which again, same size, similar price actions out here, doing that 1,000 times. So paper buying that vertical, the 30-40 vertical, and then turning around and selling the 22 put for $2.75 1,000 times, and then buying the 18 put for a penny. They got that for a penny in April over there. So just giving themselves a little bit of downside protection. Why not? If you're going to get it for a penny, why not? Doing that 1,000 times there as well. So interesting stuff. We have effectively a July risk reversal, pretty meaty one, but effectively paper buying that put. And then we have this vertical financed by a put spread here out in Spikes Land. Mr. Rock Lobster, what are your thoughts on these pretty sizable trades? We've seen vol spike all over the place, pun intended, this week. We've seen you yourself, going upside, going downside, kind of reflecting the schizophrenic nature of vol this week. What do you think about these trades here where we got someone picking up a pretty meaty put and then someone else picking up a call spread and trying to sell some puts to finance it?
I like the call spread with puts to finance. That's always the weirdest trade for me, by the way. So if you think about it, because you think about how like these futures are always at a premium to when you're in contango, right? So, if you buy a call spread, you think about it, why bother selling the put? Because the future's melting the whole time. So you might as well sell the put at the end of the cycle and wait till the futures go somewhere or until you have some confirmation. So when people do the risk reversals in these products, I don't think they really understand how they work, because, the cash is 20-ish and the future's 25 and you're selling the 20 put but the future's still kind of crushing down on it. So it's like I don't know. It's weird to me that you sell the put spread right away when the underlying when the future underlying is decaying. It kind of that puts my mind in a bit of a twist, to be honest. So I can see how you like that in an equity, but these products are a little different. But as you would say, c'est la vie. People do what they want to do. But yeah, it's good to see some. It's good to see some Spikes paper flowing in as an alternative. The
folks are slinging it, seeing some smaller retail. I like to keep an eye on those as well. See if the 10 lots are flocking in there and they're hitting there as well. So it's nice to see the folks are starting to flock in over there. Let's see what's flocking in over there on VIX options today. Not so much. Almost exactly 250,000 contracts on the tape as of a few minutes ago. The ADV also down substantially. A couple of weeks ago, listeners, we were talking about 720 or so in that range. We're well below that now. Coming into today, it's 603,000 contracts. That's down almost 50,000 contracts from this time last week, and obviously well over 100,000 from a couple of weeks ago. So VIX ADV taking a bit of a hit in the last couple of weeks. Let's go on out there, see what the top positions are out there in VIX land. Obviously, we had March roll off the board here, so we got mostly April on the docket here. That's being reflected also in the OI out there. Also in the how much it costs in terms of paper size to break into the top 10 here. Cost you only 111,000 contracts to break into the top 10 in VIX right now. That gets you to the April 30 calls. By the way, with all that March rolling off the board, it has kind of restructured our top 10 a little bit. We got 4 calls now in the top 10 as opposed to, I think it was 1, maybe 2 last week. So it's effectively double as many calls in the top 10 now as there were last week. Read into that what you will. Is that just March positions rolling off and they haven't been replaced yet in April? Or is there maybe more upside interest out there? I'll leave that up to you folks to intuit. But number 10, 111,000 contracts for the April 30 calls. Number 9, one of my favorites on the list here, $1.15 of the June 110 calls. Every time I say that, I have to laugh. Number 8, 126,000 of the April doubles. That's 3 of our 4 calls already there. Number 7, 132,000 of the May 20 puts. That's our only May in the top 10 today. Number 6, $1.56 of the April 19 puts. Number 5, $1.60 of the April 21 puts. Number 4, $1.94 of the April 18 puts. Number 3, 201,000. So you got to get all the way up to number 3 before you even break into the 200K range, listeners. That gets you to the April 22 puts. Number 2, 203,000 of our fourth and final call in the top 10, the April 60s. And then number one with a decent sized bullet, 236,000 of the April 20 puts. Usually that's probably enough to break into the top 10 in VIXLAND. These days, not so much. About 6.8 million contracts open, about 3.5 million on the calls and 3.3 million on the puts. Let's break down some of the action. Like I said, not a ton on the tape today. Of that 250,000 contracts, our top 5 most active contracts today are the April 22 puts with about 16,500, followed by the April 20 puts with 14,600. Then number 3, the April 65 calls. So there are some calls to be found out there. It's not just the Rock Lobster loading up on calls out there. Other folks as well. 11,000 and change of the April 65s. Number 4, about 11,000 as well of the April 25s. So a little bit more relevant strike there. And round out the top 5 here, 10,400 of the May 23 puts. Go out to yesterday, a little bit more active day out there, 419,000 contracts on the tape. The most active contracts yesterday, the April 18 puts with about 26,000 going up there, followed by number 2, 25,000 of the April 19 puts. Number 3 and number 4 pretty much tied. The May and August 42 half calls. So maybe a bit of a time spread going up because the paper is exactly the same. 28,800 for the May 42 halves and 21,600 for the April 42 halves. I'll have to dig into that a little bit, see what we had going up there. That's an interesting strike and interesting months if it is indeed a time spread. We've been talking about calendars for a while out here. I was just pricing some up earlier in the show, just looking at some. You can get all sorts of fun things for credits or even money out there based on how these futures are lining up. It's interesting times out there, listeners. And then we've got here number 5, 18,200 of the April 17 puts. Wednesday, a little bit more paper still, 489,000 going up total on the day. The number 1 contract out there on Wednesday was the April 42 halves with 35,000 of those, followed by number 2, 22,000 of the April 20 puts. Numero trace here also 22,000 of the April 60 calls. Going back to those strikes again. Number 4, April 65. So number 4, about 20,000. And number 5, the April 35. So with 19K almost exactly. Tuesday was the big day of the week, but only by 10,000 contracts. Listeners, 963,000. So closing in on 1 million on Tuesday. That's the day we saw a lot of big action in the vol space. 96,000 of the March 19 puts was our big dog that day, followed by 93,000 of the March 20 puts. So some tight put action there in March. Obviously, those were all going out this week as well. So a lot of closing maybe paper there as well. Number 4, we drop off quite a bit. 37,000, or number 3 actually, of the April 18 puts. Number 4, 30,000, pretty much exactly of the April 21 puts. And round out the top 5 on Tuesday, 28K of the April 23 puts. Monday, also an active day, only 10K less, 953,000 going up on Monday. The big dog on Monday, 87,000 of the March 20 puts, followed by number 2, 78,000 of the March 21 puts. So seen a bit of a theme there, followed by number 3, 56,000 of the May 20 puts. Number 4, 50,700 of the May double. So there were some calls to be found on Monday. And round out the top 5 on Monday, 29,500 of the March 22 puts. Mr. Rock Lobster, a lot of paper to parse this week, particularly earlier in the week when we saw the big vol movements going up out there. Anything catch your eye, including, did you notice, was this a time spread on Thursday, and any other paper lighting up your tape out here this week, sir?
I think from a paper point of view, again, this is like one of those other weeks where mostly I saw a lot of put buying. At least that's what I thought I saw anyway. Action right around the lower strikes. So 2019, 18, and we're even looking at possibly the 17s for a nickel, like stuff like that. Just because, hey, you know what? We still have a month left in the cycle. And we are very close to the 19 handle. So all of those puts are very interesting from a price point of view. So at least pit crazy wise, which now is their official name inside of Option Pit, by the way.
See, it only took a couple of years for me to make that stick.
I know. It's funny. Is like as soon as if I tell Longo that, he's going to want another marketing fee. You know, he's going to want a marketing fee.
I'm not Sebastian. I don't stick to my marketing fees. I just want my credit.
Exactly. So, yeah, I've seen mostly just what I would call just the interesting volume is around the puts because, you know, the way skew works and the VIX and stuff, those puts are relatively inexpensive. And you could get the shock. you could get a bit of a shock lower. Like I said, if they can't sell VIX off this week when the Qs are supposed to look ugly and awful, I don't know what it's going to take to keep that index up, but we'll see.
We shall see. We'll also see. I did some digging while the Rock Lobster was talking there. That was a roll/time spread going up out there. Was the May-Aug 42.5 call spread going up 21,570 times. Paper buying it looks like for 71 cents on, what was this? This was on Thursday. Yeah, yesterday. So interesting stuff, doing that in the morning. That could be a roll there. Interesting stuff. Mr. Brian, while I keep digging here, I know you're crazies of your own over there in Ally. We'll come up with a new name for them, obviously, because crazies is taken. What have they been up to in the world of VIX options this week, sir?
Well, if I'm looking at this volume too, as Andrew was mentioning, the marketplace, to see all the put buying that came in general, I actually kind of expect to see a little bit more. I thought that this was going to be the week that we might break and stay below that 20 level for the first time. So you got some decent volume in the puts, but I actually, now that you've laid it all out for us in such a nice format, I'm kind of surprised we didn't see a little bit more volume on the 1918 handle, just flat out buying those puts in general. Now, I also believe that, we're still fairly high on the VVIX. We still got the VVIX trading up around 114. So you're still kind of paying up for some of that premium. So the volatility of the actual options in the actual VIX index is still staying relatively high. So it's such a tough thing to decipher. But to go back to Andrew's statement that if we can't push this market down below that 19 level this week, and basically beyond, then I don't know when we get there. So to see some of the volume in those strikes, I actually would kind of expect to see a little bit more going out into the April and May expirations. But I guess that's my biggest takeaway from seeing this activity that we saw over the week on the VIX option contract.
And you folks love slinging yourself some VXX. It is rewarding you yet again with the omnipresent erosion. And it was nice enough to reset a lot of it yesterday to let you have a chance to get back in. So when the Rock Lobster gets out, you get in. 1275 as of a few minutes ago out there in VXX land, down almost exactly 1.5 points from where it was this time last week. So some more healthy, juicy erosion going on out there in VXX land. Decent paper out there as well. Pretty much we have almost, actually, VXX is leading right now. It was 253,000 contracts. That was a few minutes ago in VIX. So VIX could have caught up. But as of a few seconds ago, VXX was at 258,000 contracts. So VXX and VIX neck and neck from an options paper perspective out there today. So that's interesting stuff in and of itself. Shows how much VXX has grown and captured mind share over the course of the past year. The ADV also up a little bit as well, about 5,000 contracts to a pretty hefty 381,000 contracts out there. So not quite in VIX land yet. That's 603. But as VIX keeps going down in ADV and VXX keeps ticking up, we may have a meeting of the mind somewhere around 500K sometime. That would be pretty interesting to see. In terms of top 10 positions out there, obviously, we have a big dog that's going away this afternoon. That's still the big dog out there. In fact, a lot of this top 10 is going away today. So it'll be very interesting to see how this restructures going forward. Number 10 cost you 34,000 contracts to break into the top 10 in VXX right now. That gets you to the April 20s. By the way, we are now at an interesting impasse here in the top 10 for VXX because we're at exactly 50-50. Puts to calls. For a while there, calls were hard to be found in both the VIX top 10 and in the VXX top 10. And now we're back to 50-50. So that's kind of interesting. Again, 34,000 for number 10 of the April 20 calls. Number 9, 34,500 of the March 15 puts. Number 8, 35, almost 36,000 of the March 30 calls. Number 7, 37K of the March 17 calls. Number 6, 37K of the March 16 puts. Number 5, 40,000 of the April 15 puts. Number 4, 42,000 of the March 16 calls. Number 3, 46,000 of the March 14 puts. Now we start ticking up a little bit here. 62,000 for number 2 of the April 14 puts. And the big dog still out there. at least for the rest of this day, are 88,000 of the April 20 calls. Those have kind of been dominating the OI for a while out there. Hopefully, for the sake of this trader out here, they overwrote the hell out of all of those. But either way, we shall see. Total of about 2.6 million contracts open, about 1.4 million on the calls, and about 1.2 million on the puts. In terms of activity today, like I said, it's kind of lighting up the tape out there today. The top 5 out there today, 19,000 of the March 13 puts for number 1, followed by 13, almost 14,000 of the March 13 calls. Again, when I say March, these are all going out today, listeners. Number 3, 9,500 of the March 13 halves. Number 4, getting out to April 16s for about 9,000. And then number 5, 8,600 of the March 13 half puts. Mr. Rocklops, I know you've had quite the saga, the back and forth, the give and take, the yin and yang out there with VXX this week. What's been lighting up your tapes, sir?
Again, put buying. With VXX right now, there's actually, as a percentage of VXX, I think it's decaying at 40 cents a week. So what is that? So that's 80 cents every 2 weeks. So not quite 10%, but let's call it 8% every 2 weeks. So every 4 weeks, that's 16. That's a solid 16% just in the decay premium alone. So you're looking at $1.60 lower. So that's like right around $11 for a month from now. So you can buy the April 14 puts for $2. So with the buck of intrinsic value in them. So there is a lot of potential decay. So what happened is, people like buying calls, but, a lot of times you make money buying puts in there. So most of the volume that we were looking at was more toward the put buying side in VXX. So a lot of decay happening in the product with that, with the future premium. Mostly put buying. That's what we're looking at.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to fault the put buying out there. I'm trying to think back in history how many times I've made money on VXX calls, and I haven't really traded that many to the upside. So it hasn't been that many. Usually the scenario for VXX for me is some sort of downside proposition. And at least for right now, that seems to be the way to be heading out there. Going out to UVXY, another product you folks like to fade out there, wherever Mr. Short Vol is. Hopefully he's listening. He's been the UVXY defender for a long time out there, as I've unfairly maligned it, at least in his eyes. It's at about a 670 as of a few minutes ago, down about 1.3 points. So again, kind of playing the similar erosion game out there to VXX. And we have some listener questions about that a little bit later. The ADV also getting pretty firm out here. So UVXY starting to really feel its oats out here. 396,000 contracts is the ADV out there in UVXY. So that actually puts it about 15,000 contracts north of VXX. Who'd have thunk that? A few years ago, an esoteric product like UVXY would be doing more paper than a VXX, which is in and of itself is esoteric. We're probably a little bit less so than UVXY. It's just kind of where we find ourselves in the market right now, listeners. And that ADV, which is already lofty, is down 12,000 contracts from last year. It was over 400K last week. And today so far, about 238,000 contracts on the tape. So a little bit lighter than VIX and VXX. But interesting, we're seeing these three vol products now kind of hanging neck and neck from a volume perspective, which is kind of interesting. Let's do a quick rundown. Let's do top 5 out here in the UVXY because we're kind of coming up against it. Number 5, March 7s, 27, almost 28,000. Again, when I say March, these are going out today, listeners, not the weeklies or anything. Number 4, 29, almost 30,000 of the April 11s. Number 3, 30,000, pretty much exactly of the March 8s. Number 4, 37,000 of the March 10s. And round out the top 5 here, 39K of the June 5. That's an interesting strike out there. Let's see in terms of today's action, what the paper is. Number 1 out there in UVXY today, the March 7s. So slightly out of the money calls, doing 26,500. Not surprising. It's pretty much the at the money call strike right now. Number 2, about 20K of the March 7 puts. Number 3, 16,200 of the March 6 half puts. Number 4, actually these last two, the March 6 halves and now the March 7 calls with 12,600 for number 4. Those are both expiring next week, March 26th. So those are in the weeklies. Then we go back out to March expiring today with about 12,000 of the March 7 half calls. So interesting stuff afoot. Mr. Rock Lobster, really quickly, what are your thoughts on UVXY? And are you crazy starting to sling it, sir? Because it seems like a lot of folks are starting to sling it.
They are. I mean, you keep thinking that, oh my gosh, UVXY is going to be awesome. But, the futures, think about how far the futures have to move to get UVXY to move $2 at this point, right? Because on a percentage move basis, like the futures have to do crazy things for UVXY to get to $7 or $8 now, right? It doesn't mean they can't, but when you look at it, like, oh my gosh. Although I did find if this is correct, the 100 strike call in UVXY I find quite interesting as a as a contract. I think that's I think somebody is looking at last year as a little bit of hopium on that strike. But other than that,
are you talking about the June 100s that are open for 19,300, the number 10 position in UVXY right now?
Yes. That was, I mean, hey, UVXY did go up there last year, and I'm sure it will happen again because one thing about these VIX spikes is that almost every spike feels worse than the last bad spike. You know, everybody's like, oh, financial crisis. Can't get worse than that. Like, well, yes, it can. So I don't even want to think about what crisis number 3 is going to look like, but I'm sure it'll be here one of these days. But yes, but as of right now, the only I can think about UVXY is it's going to reverse split. And it once again will be a fantastic opportunity to buy puts, sell calls, and just overall not like that product.
Now, you buried my opportunity. I was going to ask you after the show, Mr. Rob. I was going to do it off the air to prevent the, any exposing of your secrets. If that really was you, that 19,000 lot of the June par calls in UVXY. But now here you go. You've released your secrets to the world, so you have no one to blame but yourself, sir. Let's go on out really quickly. Some single name vol. There are still some single names popping off out there these days, listeners. You can break it all down for yourselves. You know where to go. TheOptionsInsider.com. Options, news, and articles tab there for all your options, earnings move results, and earnings season reports. We've got some move results reports now for Dollar General. They're popping off yesterday before the bell. They were at 187.5 as of this report. Going into their announcement, actually. They were pricing in, about 4.3%. They delivered 5.1%. So a rear outperformance from an earnings vol perspective. It's gone out to the premium dollar store category, aka Five Below. They were on the 17th after the bell, 196.01 going into their announcement. They were pricing in 6.7%. They delivered a whopping 2.5%. So that sounds more like it from an overall 2020 and now 2021 earnings vol perspective, which is don't buy it because it doesn't really tend to work out. We have the numbers here for next week as well. We got Darden's Restaurants before the bell on the 25th, 141.25. They're pricing in a pretty hefty 873. You may say that sounds kind of rich, but then again, they've delivered 1035 in the past. So that's actually a discount compared to their previous moves out there. So there are still some interesting names to watch. Overall, though, for the season, this week is by far the worst, most blood red for the vol buyers out there. Only 52% bang for your buck from a vol buying perspective out there. The best weeks were week 3, 95%, and week 4, 99%, but still everything in the red this season, the whole season averages out to 77%. So yet again, now we're fully a year into this narrative of the earnings vol bloodletting. When will it change? I thought it might be this season. It seemed like they had squeezed those straddles enough that this would be the season we start to see some outperformance, and they widen it out again. But not so much. We'll have to wait again until next season. You don't have to wait much longer to get your questions answered. It is time for the Volatility voicemail.
It's time to share your thoughts and opinions with your fellow volatility traders. It's time to check the Volatility voicemail. Make your voice heard by dialing 779-669-4VOL. Posting a comment on the OptionsInsider.com, sending an email to questions@theoptionsinsider.com, or posting your questions to twitter.com/options. or facebook.com/theoptionsinsider.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Vol voicemail. You guys ask us questions. Sometimes we turn the spotlight back on you like we're doing right now out there. You can get at Options. Of course, if you're listening live, you're going to have it spoiled for you right now. We have our poll. It's been running pretty much all week. We asked you folks out there. Everyone's talking about volatility. They're saying this product is volatile. This product is super volatile. But who's the king? Who's the big dog? So we gave you 4 choices and said which one had the highest, just straight up 30-day at the money implied vol at that moment when we did it, which was Monday of this week. We said, no cheating, use your gut. Our audience is pretty good about being honest. They like to try to guesstimate these things. Gave you 4 choices, 4 names for products that are pretty much synonymous with volatility these days on people's lips. Tesla, of course, a name everyone says is super volatile. Bitcoin, also a product that is super volatile. VIX itself, it is volatility, but it is also volatile. And then, of course, the mother of the meme names, GameStop, out there. Coming into the start of the show, we had a pretty strong weighting, shall we say, towards GameStop. 61.4% of you saying GameStop. 19.3% of you, only 19.3% of you saying Bitcoin. 14%, even less saying Tesla. And a meager 5.3% for VIX. Mr. Brian, what are your thoughts? A, if you have a vote in this poll, have at it. And then B, what are your thoughts, more importantly, on how our audience is shaping up? Do you agree, sir?
Well, I'm kind of disappointed in the VIX number, 5%. I'm like, the VIX is the king of volatility.
Yeah, do they listen to this show? They should know where VIX goes somewhere in that ranking, right?
There at least should be some loyalty to the VIX, you would think, but obviously 5% on the VIX, ouch, that kind of hurts. But obviously the GameStop one would without a doubt, actually, I understand that is the leader. And I actually talked a little bit. We had our little PR call a couple of weeks ago. And one of the biggest things that I brought up in the PR call was how GameStop was pricing in 100-point moves. Like the cost of those way out of the money call options were still ridiculous overall, but now in hindsight over the last couple of weeks, you understand why. The story is still there, the narrative is still there, the volatility is still there. So without a doubt, I understand why they picked GameStop. I'm just disappointed at how bad they faded the VIX.
Yeah, I thought just listening to this show, we quote VVIX all the time. That should give you some idea. I'm not saying definitely it's the winner. We're going to reveal results in a second, but I thought I'd get a few more votes than that. You're right. Mr. Rock Lobster, what are your thoughts on this poll and how our audience is voting? Do you agree, disagree? Do you have any surprises like Brian did, sir?
In this case, the GameStop in the poll, no, because GameStop has been the only product that I can recall that's ever generated 1,000 vol and options. GameStop was the first ever I've seen soup Nazi options, which are there's no vol for you, no calls for you, no puts, there's no options for you. Because they're like, everything's 1,000 vol, you can all go whatever. So the first thing, I've never quite seen options at a price that, yeah, I don't think you can make money doing anything with them.
Yeah,
to be honest. Because that's just like, there's a point where like the liquidity provider is like, whatever, this is also stupid. So yes, it does not surprise me that GameStop is on the top. That was my choice, just because. Where do you go from 1,000 vol? And the funny thing is every time, like I said, every time we set an insane level, what will shock me, what will be the next insane level. So as long as I've been doing this for 30 years, it's not going to surprise me to see something else absolutely and totally insane and head shaking. But hey, whoever thought we'd have 1 million Reddit people all piling into the same name at once? Gosh knows what happens when a whole continent decides to pile into a name at once. Like, oh my gosh, I can see the day when this democratization of option trading, it'll get quite wild, I predict.
It's already getting pretty wild and indeed perhaps woolly out there. Let's pay off this poll now, even though it runs for a little bit longer. Listen, I'll give you the secret surprise answer. It'll probably be done by the time the podcast listeners hear it. But if not, you can go in and vote and sound like a genius. But you folks are right. You are a pretty savvy bunch. I shouldn't fade you. You're 61.4% saying GameStop. Yeah, we kind of threw that in there. We kind of figured that would be a bit of a no-brainer. And when we ran it on Monday, we've updated the numbers for today now, but when we ran it on Monday, GameStop was at a 335.4% 30-day at the money implied volatility. So it was far and away the leader. But I was kind of surprised with Brian that VIX didn't get a little bit more love. You listen to this show, we're always quoting VVIX. What's VVIX been for the better part of the last year? North of 120. So you know it's probably hanging out at triple digits. On Monday when we ran it, granted, that was a pretty volatile day for VIX, so it was getting jacked. It was around a 158. We ran it a little bit later today here, just coming into Showtime to check all the numbers, and it was much more sane, 103. But still, in the triple digits. So VIX, a firm number 2 out there. You might say, hey, what about Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin, if you listened to the Crypto Rundown on Monday, you would have heard we gave you the level then. It was at about a 95 and then actually about a 98 and a quarter on Monday's show when we ran that. So shy of the triple digits, but Bitcoin vol has been hovering around that high 90s, low triple digits for a while. I just ran it again a few minutes ago, actually, courtesy of our friends over in Genesis Volatility, and it actually has come in 87 and a quarter right now. And the high for the year so far was 124.36. That was back on February. I have to look. February 23rd. I know the day because that's a hot day in crypto land. So yeah, that one was 124. So that's as high as 30-day at the money vol got. So everyone thinks Bitcoin's synonymous with vol, but even at its height so far this year, I mean, it's ETH a little bit more juice. That's gotten closer to 200%, but Bitcoin is firmly in the low triple digits, but not quite blowing the doors off GameStop right now. And Tesla is a comparatively anemic. Today is at about a 75 and a half. And when we ran it on Monday, it was at a 73.1. So if you're going to rank these in order, listeners, it's GameStop way on top, VIX number 2, and then you got Bitcoin number 3 and Tesla number 4. So everyone says, oh, Tesla's the most volatile thing. Actually, number 4. And Bitcoin, the most volatile thing. Actually, number 3. That's one of the reasons why we did this poll, listeners. Put things in a little bit more perspective. But now it's time for us to put the world of volatility in perspective. It's time for that segment. You know you've been waiting for it. It's time for the crystal ball.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
All right, welcome to the crystal ball, the portion of the show where we basically break down what's going to happen in the world of vol for the coming week and predict where volatility in the form of VIX cash and spikes will be this time next week. And, you know, it seemed like it might continue to fade throughout the show. Actually, it's kind of held a little firm. Coming into the end of the showtime, we got spikes at about a 20 and a quarter, which is pretty much where it was at the top of the show. Yeah, we were at about 2015 at the top of the show. VIX cash is at about 2020, and it's right around the 20 handle right now again out there. So neither of the vol products have moved too much out there over the course of the show, at least net from the start of the show until now. So hovering around these levels. So that puts me at a pretty good level over there. I was kind of feeling that level last week, and it looks pretty good because I was at 2025. That puts me at exactly a bullseye pretty much for spikes. I mean, that's actually exactly what it is right now, which is kind of eerie. Actually, I'm 0.02 away. So it's a 2023 in spikes right now. And VIX cash at about VIX cash right now, let's see, at about a 2020 as well. So I'm 0.05 away on VIX cash. So that is a bullseye, a winner chicken dinner, no matter how you cut it. Listen, usually our frame of reference, our margin of victory is a tenth of a point, 0.1. So I'm 0.02 and 0.05 away this week. So I will take my victory because you know what? These days, listeners, particularly bullseyes, those are few and far between. They've been hard to find of late because I don't know if you've noticed, vol is moving quite a bit. I wasn't exactly feeling the annihilating fade that Simon and the Meatball were feeling last week because the Meatball was at 1801. Simon was at 19. And then we had Matt Amberson from Orats at a 2001. So he's looking all right, too. He's right below me there. So if it wasn't for me, he'd be the winner. But I was feeling just north of the 20 handle. That's what I felt in my bones. And that's exactly where we are. So I will ring my virtual bell and take my winner chicken dinner. So you know what? Never let it be said that I am afraid to blaze new trails. So unlike what the Rock Lobster says, he says, I scum him and all this stuff. Never mind, he hasn't won a crystal ball in, I don't know, 3 years, but I digress. I will bravely go first, Mr. Rock Lobster. So you cannot accuse me of any scummage. I will blaze the trail and allow you to follow in my stead. So I say we're at about a 20 and a quarter in spikes, 20 or so in VIX cash. Will we feel the fade coming in through this time next week? You know, this week, we started feeling it, and then something popped. That's been happening time and again. Something has popped to keep us up there. But you know what? I think I'm going out on a limb, and I'm going to say, I think this time next week, I think we will be shy of the 20 handle. I'm not going to say a ton. I'm going to say 1955 for this time last week, roughly 0.7 of a point lower than where I am right now. So there we go. I blazed the trail, and now I will be nice and let our guest go next. Mr. Brian, sir, what are you feeling for volatility in the form of VIX cash and spikes this time next week, sir?
I think I'm going to go with a hope number. Not necessarily a feeling. I would really like it to be below 19. So I'm going to make that my call. So we'll go 1890. How about that?
What's the old saying, right? Put it out there into the ether. You can will it into existence, right?
Right. It would be really fun to actually get a substantial number below the 20 level and see what that does to the marketplace overall. So I'm going to play a little bit of the hope game.
There we go. Playing a little bit of hopium in the crystal ball. At least he has a strategy. Who knows what the Rock Lobster strategy is? Let's find out. I'm sure he's going to somehow take some umbrage now that I went first. So, Mr. Rock Lobster, what do you have in store for us this time next week?
That's what, because the hardest thing is my number was going to be 1891. So I don't really know what to do.
Now you can't blame me. Brian scummed you. There you go.
Yeah, I was okay. So
great minds think alike. That's all I can say.
I do think that's kind of the, I'm just going on the dearth and lack of worry right now. So
I'll put you down for an 1891, and if right. Anything below 1890, Brian's got it. So there you go.
He owns this number. He owns that number, so that's okay. So
you have a 100th of a point.
Below 1890, you got to invite me back next week.
There we go. That's a deal. I like that. All right, so there's our market for this time next week, listeners. All of us below the 20 handle, some more so than others. I'm at a 1955. I did just have a bullseye this week. I'm just putting that out there in case you want to know, who to wait here. And then you got the Rock Lobster doing his fade yet again, 1891. Scumming Brian by 0.01. So 100th of a point out there. And Mr. Brian at an 1890. All right, everybody. Unfortunately, that music means it is time once again to bring our journey through the world of volatility to a close. What a fun journey it's been. We pack a lot of living into this hour, listeners. There's a lot of vol we talk about. Somehow, if there's a product we don't discuss, you think you should make it onto the show, remember, it's only 1 hour. Hit us up. Let us know. You guys aren't shy about sharing your opinions with us. So we do love to hear from all of you out there. And as our guest, Brian, you did an able job holding down the MIAX hot seat this week. If folks are intrigued, they want to check out your show or perhaps what you folks have cooking over there in the land of Ally, where should they go? What should they do?
Well, obviously, you can check out Options Playbook Radio right here on Options Insider Radio. And then if you'd like to get a hold of me, just you can email me directly at theoptionsguy@invest.ally.com. And everything that we do over on the education site, I tweet about at my handle at Brian Overby.
Give him a follow over there on the old Twitters. He's getting pretty active over there at Brian Overby, just all one word, OVERBY, listeners. Give him a follow. A lot of good tweets coming at you over there as well, in between episodes of OPR. And Mr. Rock Lobster, if folks are inclined, they want to go to you to learn how to scum someone else in the crystal ball, where should they go? What should they do?
Well, yeah, you can come to optionbit.com and go to the memberships area and sign up for any one of our educational courses or trade or trade products. If you want to learn how to trade options, come on over to optionpit.com and we'll be happy to help you. And we don't scum our customers. We wait till they get in first. So the only place you really get scummed anywhere really nowadays is on the Option Insider Radio Network. So
they say all their skullduggery and scumbagging for us, listeners. You can learn. You can get in ahead of the scumbagging. Optionpit.com. And you know where to go to learn about all things spikes. MIAXoptions.com/spikes is the place to go for the quotes, the historical data, the press releases you want to know about Viking and everything else, or V-Spikes, I should say. Meatball has infected me with this Viking. Then check it out, MIAXoptions.com/spikes. Also a link to a cool show called Volatility Views. I ask, nay, I demand, what more could you ask for from a volatility-oriented destination. If you want to learn about execution services and trading technology, you know where to go. MATRIXexecutions.com. MATRIX executions.com. They're the place to go to learn about execution services and trading technology and a whole bunch more. MATRIXexecutions.com. And on behalf of everybody over there in Matrix Land, everybody over there in MIAX Land, and Mr. OVERBY and the Rock Lobster, and indeed myself, thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, subscribing, for listening live, for sending in such great questions and comments and voting in our polls. And we'll see you back next week for another Volatility Views.
Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MIAX is proud to bring you Spikes Volatility products. Spikes options and futures are traded on the Spikes Volatility Index, SPIKE, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's volatility reimagined. Learn more about Spikes at MIAXoptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. Volatility Views is also brought to you by Matrix Executions, LLC, an agency broker-dealer focused on best execution in trading workflow automation. A technology-driven firm, Matrix is led by trading pioneers with decades of experience designing and building best-in-class solutions for options markets. Matrix connects to all domestic exchange venues and multiple international exchanges and serves both institutional and individual clients. For more information on Matrix Executions, LLC, please visit matrixexecutions.com. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's MIXLR.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.